Hey everybody, this is Kennedy Hawk from the MCM team, and I'm here with a quick video to tell you 5 reasons a Marvel Champions player may love the One Piece trading card game, and why you should check it out. If you've watched our channel recently, you've seen that we're verging into other card games. It's definitely a fact that most of the people that check out our content and channel are here for Champions content, and that is not going to go away, so don't worry about that. If anything, we're going to be talking about other fun card games we love. And one of my favorite card games right now is the One Piece trading card game. With the recent arrival of the Netflix adaptation of One Piece, it's never been a better time to be a pirate and to try to be king of the pirates through this trading card game. There's currently a boom in the trading card game community, right? There's always been the big three. There's always been Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, and Magic. They will be there for a long time, but there's a lot of smaller card games that have started up recently, Morgana, and other things that have really taken off and seen large, massive influxes of people playing games in stores. This is good for Marvel Champions because it brings more people to the hobby, and it's good for trading card games for other people in maybe more of the tabletop, living card game hobby to check other things out. Let's go over some of the reasons in the One Piece TCG that a Marvel Champions player might be attracted to or want to try out this game. First thing first, if you've seen the Netflix show and loved it, it's definitely a game you should try out just to see your favorite characters from that show appear in our favorite thing, Cardboard Crack. But let's get on with our 5 reasons that we would maybe love the One Piece trading card game. Alright, reason number 1 is you build around a hero or leader. Just like in Marvel Champions, you start building your deck by picking a hero. Here you're going to pick a leader card. So here's 2 leader cards shown, Roronoa Zoro and Monkey D. Luffy. They both bring different things to you as you're building your deck. This leader is going to start in play. They're going to be in play the whole game. Once this leader is defeated, you have lost the game. It is a competitive game in the end of the day, so you're going to be trying to defend your leader a little bit. This leader starts in play, like I said, and is really going to shape your deck and help you guide your card selection as you're building your deck. Leaders have a power. Both of these leaders, Zoro and Luffy, have 5,000 power. This is one of those card games where instead of saying 5 power, they like to say 5,000. It's cute. They have a life value in the bottom right, so Zoro has 5 life. Luffy has 4 life, which seems like a low number, but it's surprisingly not. And they have a color. So Zoro is red. You can see that in the 5. It's a fully red circle or across his card. Or in the bottom left, there's the little 6 slotted symbol that has just red for Zoro and has red and green for Luffy. When building your deck, you are restricted to the colors of your leader. So while Luffy has more colors he can pick from when building his deck, he's only going to have 4 life as sort of a punishment or a balancing factor with that. So you're going to pick a leader, and based on that leader's ability, their stats, their life, and their colors, it's going to completely change your deck building experience. You might take a red Zoro leader with a 50 card deck, and this red green Luffy leader with a 50 card deck, and those 2 decks, even though they may be identical, could play completely differently. And Luffy could even tweak his deck and put green cards in as well. Pretty cool way to sort of guide new players in deck building. Alright, so here's just some leader examples. There are a ton of leaders in this game. I believe it's like 34 or 36. I just counted. It's later in this video. But there are 3 leader Luffys, and he's the main character from the show and from the manga and from the anime, depending on what your content choice is. But here are the 3 different examples of Luffy leaders right now. There's a red Luffy leader who comes in a starter deck. He has 5,000 power and the strike attribute. He has 5 life. There's the black leader, Monkey D. Luffy, who also has the Straw Hat Crew trait, 5 life, the strike attribute, and then we have our red-green Luffy from set 1 that we had just talked about. And the main difference here is their abilities. So Monkey D. Luffy from starter set 1 has Activate Main once per turn. Give this leader or one of your characters 1 rested Dawn card. The black starter 8 Luffy says when a character is KO'd, give up to 1 rested Dawn card to this leader. And Monkey D. Luffy, the red-green leader, says activate main once per turn 4. You may rest the specified number of Dawn cards in your cost area. Set up to 1 Supernova or Straw Hat type character card with a cost of 5 or less is active. It gains plus 1,000 power this turn. So 3 completely different abilities, and they all have to do with this Dawn card, so we should probably go to that next. So reason number 2, wall of text, is the resource system or the Dawn system. I played Marvel. I played Magic back in the day, and I definitely remember being land screwed. Drawing into too many lands or too few lands can just make that game unfun sometimes. Not trying to dump on a game that a lot of people like, it's just something that I find unenjoyable and really dated in card game systems. Much like Champions, there's going to be no mana screw or land screw in One Piece trading card game. Instead, you construct a 50 card deck, and then you have a 10 card Dawn deck. All Dawn are the same. There's no deck construction there. There's just, blinged out ones that are different colors and have different panels from the manga. But you can see this card on the screen. That is what all Dawn cards do. They can be spent in different ways, just like in Marvel Champions. You can exhaust these cards or rest these cards to pay the cost of a character or an event or a stage and put it into play. Or you can attach a Dawn card that is not rested from your cost area to one of your characters or leaders. It provides plus 1000 power that turn and boosts their offensive ability. So it's not exactly the same as Marvel Champions where you're pitching cards to pay for cards, but your resources will always be static. You can accelerate resources and you can put them back into your Dawn deck to do things, but for the most part, players are going to gain 2 resources a turn. The first player will start with 1, the second player will get 2, so the first player will kind of be on odds 1, 3, 5, 7. The second player will be on evens 2, 4, 6, 8. But there's no hoping that I draw into the right resource card. There's enough hoping that you draw into the right cards that they don't want to add that extra randomization tax to the game. So there's lots of different uses for these Dawn cards. They come back every turn, so by the end of the game, you're probably going to have 10 resources to spend every turn. That's like the maximum number of Dawn you can have in your cost area. But that ramp is sort of automatic. You don't have to search for Captain America's serum or anything like that. You're going to be gaining resources each turn and ramping up the cost curve without having to worry about drawing into lands or something like that. So, we talked about Dawn and how they have different abilities, so let's look at these 3 leader abilities so you can see just how different a deck might be. So this red Monkey D. Luffy leader, mono red, had activate main once per turn, give this leader or one of your characters one of your rested Dawn cards. That Dawn card is still going to provide the power boost, so he's like an efficiency hero. After you've spent that resource, you can still attach it to a character once per turn using his ability. The black Monkey D. Luffy hero has your turn. When a character is KO'd, give 1 rested Dawn card to this leader. So you can use your characters to KO other characters and then buff up your leaders so that they can go into combat. Pretty cool. And then the red-green Luffy is going to be about restanding characters and spending those resources differently. So you can see there's lots of different ways you're going to use these resources, just like you would for costs in Marvel Champions. All right, the next reason 3 is an ally limit. Champions players are super used to an ally limit. It works very similarly in One Piece TCG. So in One Piece TCG, you can have at most 5 characters plus your leader on the field. So your leader is a separate card, not a character. So 6 bodies, basically. And gone are the days, right, of someone building up 1,000,000 defenders and just never letting you get through. They could build up 5, just like we could build up 3 chump blockers in Marvel Champions, but we're not going to be building up these giant stalemate boards where no one can push through. Especially because Dawn attach on the offensive side of the turn, but not on the defensive side of the turn. Boards tend to not be super sticky. Unlike Champions, not every character can block either. So one of my least favorite things about Champions, unfortunately, is that chump blocking is so prevalent, and the designers really seem to have to stretch to get us to not be able to chump block, which worked out really well in the next evolution box. Here, only characters with blocker, like Chopper seen here, can defend. But just managing your ally limit and how many characters you can have on the board versus how many cards you want to have in your hand is something that I'm familiar with from Marvel Champions. That being said, the ally limit or character limit here works the exact same way. If I have 5 characters on the board and I draw a really good one that I want to play that Nami from my hand, I can discard a character to play a new one. I can't discard characters willy-nilly, but if I'm at my limit, I can replace a character with a new one. All right, cards have multiple uses. We talked about Dawn having multiple uses, but so do the cards in our hand. They're not going to be spent as resources, but they are going to be spent differently. Each card has many uses in One Piece, the trading card game, just like in Champions. There we're using those cards as resources. Here we're using them for their counter ability. When a character attacks another character or a character attacks a leader, they're going to compare their power. And if the power is equal or if the attacker is greater, that character will be defeated, or that leader will take 1 damage from their life pool, which we'll get to next. But the defender has a chance to respond. Using cards in your hand, you can discard any number of cards or trigger counter abilities on event cards. And when you discard those cards, you're boosting the defending character's power. So you can see here 3 different versions of Sanji, one from the first starter deck, one from the first collectible set, and one from the 4th collectible set. On that left-hand side of the card, they all have different counter powers. So this first Sanji has 0 counter power. You could not use him to counter. The second one has 2,000 counter power, and the third one has 1,000. So when you're building your deck, you get to have this balance of like, imagine if every card in your Champions game had 0, 1, or 2 resources, and you had to figure out the right distribution, because usually cards with 2 resources are a little bit weaker or overcosted compared to cards with 1 resource. Very similar mindset for One Piece TCG. So I really like that ability to use the card not just for its cost and being on the field, but also as like a defensive failsafe. Various card types exist, just like in Marvel Champions, right? So we don't just have character cards, we also have events, which are one-time use events. They are played just like events in Marvel Champions. They tell you when they can be played. So many events will say main, meaning during your turn. This event right here, Gum Gum Red Hawk, says counter. Your leader or up to one of your characters gains 4,000 power and KO an opponent's character with 4,000 power or less. So kind of a counter-offensive on your defending turn. That's the only way you can do things on another player's turn. You're not triggering abilities and things like that. You can block, and you can use these counter abilities or counters from hand. We also have stages like the Thousand Sunny here, which are like persisting locations. You can have 1 stage on your field at a time. And then that Gum Gum Red Hawk has this trigger ability, which we'll probably get to next. So we haven't gotten the trigger abilities yet. The reason number 5 is Life Draw. Life Draw works a little bit different than Marvel Champions, right? You are trying to defend your leader to make sure that you don't get eliminated or get removed from the game. The loss condition is life, right? If you run out of cards in life and you get hit 1 more time, you're going to alter ego form and you're out of the game. After mulligans, you're going to place X number of cards face down into your life in a specified order, like 1 through 5, and that's going to be equal to the amount of life on your leader. So while Luffy has more cards in his card building pool, he only gets 4 damage and then that final hit before he's defeated. When your leader suffers damage, you add that life to hand. This is super critical, and I think it's something that Champions players will really enjoy, because you feel powerful even when getting struck. You're always replenishing your hand more than just that 1 card a turn like many typical TCGs do. You're not drawing a full hand of cards like Marvel Champions. Now that would be amazing and I would love it, but you are getting a little bit of catch-up power along the way. This is different than something like Pokemon, right, where someone knocks out one of your characters and then you gain a prize as the person that's winning. It kind of snowballs, or could have a tendency to snowball and let one player build bigger hands and get ahead. Here, the defending player, the one that decided to not counter and take a life, or the one that got attacked, sort of gets a catch-up in their hand size. And all of those cards that come from life can also trigger their trigger ability. So this trigger ability that we saw on Gum Gum Red Hawk says give one of your opponent's leaders or characters minus 10,000 power this turn. So if you trigger this on your first time being damaged that turn, you can now neuter another character that's on the field so that they can't attack you. So you can use that trigger ability or add it to hand. You don't reveal it to your opponent. It's like this extra card draw that's built in that reminds me a lot of like the rapid amount of card draw that we get in Marvel Champions. All right. We did 5 reasons that you might love the One Piece trading card game. And if you don't love TCGs and you don't love pirates, I won't hate you, but I will cry like Zoro in this picture. So now let's go through 5 reasons that you might not like getting into a TCG, especially One Piece trading card game. And obviously my counter arguments to those as well. The first thing is cost or collectability. We're Champions players, we're used to buying a pack and knowing what's coming in it. This is a booster pack game. We're on set 4, which just came out a couple weeks ago. So you are 4 sets behind if you want to build an entire collection. And that can be a bummer, right? Because you don't want to have to buy old packs. They can be hard to find. You've got to buy a bunch of singles. Where do I start? How do I do this? A little bit crazy. That being said, just like Marvel Champions comes in precons, there are 9 currently starter decks. They release a couple every time a set comes out. These are non-randomized, fully functional 50-card decks. They're not the best decks in the world, but they're like a mile above what we see for other TCG projects. They're fully functional. You could take them to your local scene and play in a tournament and have a lot of fun. They feature all sorts of different main characters. There's a starter deck for Luffy, there's a starter deck for Crocodile, there's a starter deck for Shanks, all sorts of characters that you would want to play, and they span all 6 colors within the game. About the cost of a deck, it can vary greatly, right? It depends on, because your leader decides what color you're playing. If that color has really expensive cards or cards that people think are the top of the meta, they can be more expensive. The Zoro deck list that premiered on the channel today as well is about $90 if you bought all of those cards on TCG Player as singles. So you're buying 51 cards for about 90 bucks. And I think 4 of that is in a super rare Zoro that's $11 or $12. So that's like half of the cost is 4 cards. The rest of it is fairly cheap. Commons, uncommons, rares are usually like 10 cents or less, unless they're a meta staple that they don't have a lot of or something like that. Just to give you an idea, right, a lot of card games nowadays like to say that the major cost of cards will be in alternate arts or in foils or something like that. And I think One Piece actually does a pretty good job of that. So we have 4 randomized sets that are out so far. So I went to TCG Player today to see what is the most expensive non-alt art, non-fancy foil card in that set. So in set 1, the most expensive card, and like all rares and higher are foiled, but I'm talking about like fancy foil alt art shenanigans. The most expensive card that is gameplay unique is $13. And that is unfortunately in that Zoro deck list that I had above. 4 copies. The next step down is $10. And then it goes rapidly down after that. In set 2, the most expensive card is $28, and then $12. In set 3, the most expensive card is $43. Now that's getting into the range that I don't want to spend for. But then the next step down is 5 again, so I think that 43 will come down. It seems to be a very popular deck right now. And set 4 that just came out, the most expensive gameplay unique card is $6. So like the cost of barely more than a pack, and then down to $5. Oh, and they're really good at reprinting cards in this game too. So the $10 card in set 1 is going to be reprinted in the next starter. And the $13 card from set 1 was reprinted as an alternate art, which is, more expensive because they're rarer, in set 3 and set 4. So they're reprinting a lot of these staple cards that people might not have been able to get before, and inserting them into starter decks and making it so that it is easier to find cards. They've even put several staple cards in like the promo pack that you can get from playing in your local store. You'll get a little dash pack that has a randomized card in it. Most of those cards are reprints. There are some promo exclusive cards because Bandai likes to do that. Luckily, they're all pretty bad, so not a big deal. But yeah, so like the average cost of a deck is probably around, for like a tier 1 or tier 0 competitive deck, it's probably 90 to 100 bucks. If you're going to run a deck that uses that $43 card in it, you're probably only going to want 2 of that card, but if you decided to have 4, it could be a lot more. It could be a lot cheaper as well. So about 90 to 100 bucks is what a competitive meta deck would be. As far as rarities go, there's 5 rarities. There are common cards, uncommon cards, rare cards, and there's 2 rares or higher per pack. So 2 rare, super, or secret rares. There are super rares. There are 6 to 8 of those per box, and usually 2 to 3 per color in a set. And then there are secret rares where there's 1 to 2 per box, and there's only 2 secret rares per set. So not even every color will get a secret rare. So even looking at the things above, the $43 and $28 card are secret rares. The others, the $13 and the $6 card, are not secret rares. Those are just regular super rares. So the most rare cards aren't always the most powerful or the most expensive. Always. So far in our 4 sets of history. That being said, you are paying money. I would say overall, I've probably spent more on Champions than I have on One Piece, and I could play probably all 36 leaders in One Piece pretty competitively with the collection that I've built. So even though it seems like the cost might be higher, you can build some really competitive decks pretty cheaply just by like figuring out what colors you want to play and things like that. So if what's keeping you out of this is rarities and cost, my suggestion to you is to pick your favorite character from the One Piece franchise, or DM me on Discord and tell me what your favorite playstyle is, and I can tell you what color has that identity or playstyle, and then just buy some singles of that color, buy the starter deck of that color, and learn how the game functions. You're probably going to find, and this is what a couple of the people in our meta do, is they buy boxes, and then each of the players, like in pairs, has 3 colors, and they open the box and split the box up between the 2 of them. And they've built really cool collections that way and have a lot of fun. All right. Next, it is competitive. This is a competitive game. I cannot mask that. It requires 2 players. You are competing against each other. Someone is a winner and someone is a loser. And that loser is not always Rhino like they are in Marvel Champions. Our group doesn't mind this. We like a mix of competitive and cooperative games in our game nights. In fact, it can be really fun at the end of the night to, after we beat up on Rhino, play a couple games of One Piece rotating around the table to see who plays against who. Sometimes, someone gets that final hit on Rhino and really makes you mad and you want to punch him back, but instead you just do it through this card game, right? Typical feel bad, like options that happen in competitive card games don't really exist in One Piece. Like you can mill someone out, but there aren't cards that actively mill the other player. There's only cards that mill yourself, and there's an alternate win condition for milling yourself with some leaders. Hand hate basically doesn't exist. There's a couple cards that say if your opponent has 20 cards in hand, it's not that bad. If your opponent has like 8 cards in hand, they have to discard 1. There's nothing that just keeps a player from having options other than that player foolishly discarding all of their hand resources. And the game has this built-in catch-up mechanic that we talked about earlier. You're going to be getting cards back into your hands. So the times I feel bad in competitive games are when I'm out of choices and I feel like I can't do anything. I never feel like that in One Piece TCG. Reason 3, the theme. If you don't like pirates and superheroes, I can't help you. You're scum. No. The theme can be hit or miss, just like Champions, right? Champions has its fair share of cards that just have to exist to make a card game function. That being said, Champions is an extremely thematic game. The theme isn't quite as strong in One Piece. There's a lot of cards that simply say do extra damage, prevent extra damage, do funny shenanigans. They're kind of on like in set 4, their card pool is probably equivalent to like the end of the first wave of Marvel Champions. So we're like not quite into excessive combo wombo territory. Yet there's still really fun things that work thematically to the manga and show if you know the characters really, really well. An example here is Nami. When your deck is reduced to 0, you win the game instead of losing, according to the rules. Very awkwardly worded. Dawn times 1, when this leader attacks and deals damage to an opponent's life, you may trash the top card of your deck. So Nami is trying to steal things and stockpile them into her discard pile, just like she was stealing all sorts of money and stockpiling it in the show. So, spoilers, if you didn't know that, Nami's a thief. So there's little thematic hints in there. None of them are as like direct and obvious as they are in Marvel Champions. Champions is, in my opinion, the epitome of theme, and One Piece is probably a mediocre 5 out of 10. So if theme is really important to you, you're not going to get as good of a theme as you are out of Champions. But if you like the theme and you like pirates, especially pirates with superpowers, you'll probably like One Piece TCG. All right, next is deck building restrictions. You can't just pick any leader and combo any cards. We already talked about this a little bit, but your leader choice kind of determines your aspect choice, right? Red is kind of an aggression aspect. Funny, right? So you can't, if you decide, and the colors, well, where am I going here? The colors, there's 6 colors, they all have very distinct identities. Red is kind of aggro-y, blue is kind of control-y, purple is kind of like risk rewardy, and they all have very like tight identities. Like even as new sets come out, they're kind of exploring those identities and not taking or encroaching on each other's spaces within the color pie. That's really good. That's something that I think this game excels at compared to Champions and some other games. That being said, if you are a really, really control-y player and you like purple and you like blue, but Luffy is your guy and you want to play with Luffy as your leader and you want to be Luffy, unfortunately, these are the 3 Luffys in the game right now. Red, black, and red-green. There are more coming. Don't worry. I think there's like a red-purple and a mono-purple one coming. And I can almost guess or guarantee that eventually there will be a Luffy in every color. But if you have a specific hero and a specific color or game style that you want to play, they may not match each other. So you are going to be a little bit limited in your deck building because you're stuck within the cards that are allotted for that leader or color. Currently, there's 36 leaders across the 6 colors. All right, and the last thing is that there's less margin for error. The nice thing about Marvel Champions is it's really easy to make mistakes and recover, right? Like you're not just screwed because you discarded one card that you shouldn't have. You're going to reshuffle your deck. You're drawing a bunch of cards each turn. These things tend to smooth the game out over the long run, unless you're playing against Ronan and Nebula. Here, there's a lot of less room for error. This is the nature of a competitive game, right? If you're playing a competitive game and you make a mistake, not saying that like your opponent won't let you take it back or something like that, but if you like make a poor decision given the information in your hand, in Marvel Champions, you get the next turn to recover. Here, that decision is going to impact you the next turn, and it's going to snowball on and on and on and on. And that happens a little bit in Champions, right? Oh, I shouldn't have defended, and now I drew my obligation. Bummer. Here, it's a little bit more critical when you do make a wrong decision point. And you'll learn as you're playing, like, wow, that was a decision that I should not have done. And there's a lot of like innate decision making that happens that you'll be familiar with from Champions. That's going to feel a little bit differently or feel a little bit more painful when you realize that you made the wrong decision. Do I use this card for its counter ability or save it for each future turn? It's like, do I use this as a resource or not? You'll see it again in Champions. Do I let this damage go through to build up hand advantage, or is that too risky because my life is not as recoverable as it is in Marvel Champions? Do I trigger this ability from life or add this card to my hand? Cards are a lot more precious, so anytime you're getting card draw from life, it could be critical to make the right choice. And when do you attack or hold back your characters? In Champions, right, you're encouraged to use all the things at your disposal every turn. And here you're going to have to be a little bit more picky with how you spend your resources and cards. All right, just some other factors to wrap things up. Team play, we got it. It does exist. Diverse meta, pretty good. I'd say that there was one set where the meta was mainly dominated by one deck. And if you read, the thousands of tier lists and YouTube videos that are out there, they'll tell you that every meta has been that way. But for the most part, when I go to locals each week, I see a different deck win each week. It's not always the same character. When we look at top results from tournaments, there's probably 5 or 6 or 7 deck types that are all vying for that top spot right now. There's typically always a control deck, some sort of tempo deck that does a medium amount of control and pushing for win condition, and an all-out aggro deck in each of the metas, and they've all been pretty healthy around that. It's a quick, snappy play. Setup and teardown is way less than Marvel Champions. Games are typically 20 to 25 minutes, and in my opinion, that's on the long time. But rounds at our local store are 35 minutes. And company support, we got that too. There's a Bandai app that exists. It's not great, right? It's definitely an app that was made by a non-app maker for card games. But you can go in there and search for local stores. You can find out when local events are happening. You can find out if there's a meetup in your area and even register for tournaments at your local store through that app so you sort of reserve your spot for when you show up. Pretty cool, something I wish we had for all of our FFG games and meetups locally. So with that, I leave the decision up to you. Next week on the channel, we're going to be releasing 5 deck lists, all themed around characters that appeared in the first season of the One Piece Netflix show. So, yes, one will be Luffy. But you'll get to try to build those decks if you want, and each of them I'll have the cost breakdown of, hey, here's what this would cost to play this deck from scratch, because this is meant to be for new players or people that saw the show and want to try the game out. We're going to keep these deck costs under $40, so if you want to go buy a deck and try it out, you can definitely do so. We'll also be releasing a video next week for One Piece players, telling them why maybe they should check out Marvel Champions. So if you are someone that dabbles on both sides of the line like me, and you play One Piece and think that Champions could be a good game for some of your friends, let me know in the comments below. What are some of your favorite features from Marvel Champions that you think we should share with the One Piece community? Until then, We'll let you all sail along on your pirate crew or punch villains or whatever you're here for. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.